Okay, coming up on part three of Wesch, chapter five on infrastructure, lesson five. We're still talking about the economy, how people make a living. So we're talking about the state. Remember, private ownership was something new. Chiefdoms have non-coercive politics. Nobody can make anyone do anything they don't want to do legally, right? You can do it, but it's extra legal, and you get in lots of trouble, and you get shunned yourself if you try to force someone to do something. Social stratification. One lineage is more prestigious than other lineages. Sometimes they have slaves. These are outsiders who are forced to live there. Um, Economy. Intensive agriculture, gardening, herding, and foraging. So all of it basically. Any economy can be a chiefdom. Usually, chiefdoms are tribes that got very close to a state, a neighboring state, and so they elevated up. Um, Population medium to large, up to millions in some big chiefdoms. Hawaii was a chiefdom. Uh, Territory is indefinite with corporate ownership, so we don't have the clear boundaries there. Tribe, the politics, of course, is non coercive. Social stratification is egalitarian among the lineages. So you have these clans, and each clan usually has big men in it. Um, and each clan is equal to each other. So there's a heavy emphasis on equality, although you have temporary leaders who are called big men. So when we saw David in the video and read about the various big men in Bashkal's book, that is a tribal society. So they have gardening, herding, and foraging. Um, the population is small to medium, up to hundreds of thousands of people in some big tribes. The territory is indefinite with corporate ownership. So similar to the chiefdoms, you have corporate ownership. That land is only for us in the group. Um, you can't use it, you outsider. And then finally, bands. The politics, again, is non coercive. The social stratification is totally egalitarian. We're going to get into bands a bit more here. But totally egalitarian. Sometimes there's a gender distinction. But other than that, nobody's better than anyone else. Nobody's worse than anyone else. Economy is foraging. They do not grow their own food at all, no gardening at all. And the population is very small. You can't have more than 50 people in a band. The band is the largest unit of society, and it's basically synonymous with the extended family. And the territory is indefinite with public ownership. So these bands just sort of go across the countryside, and if they encounter someone, they can't really force anyone to do anything to leave any area. Everyone just sort of has equal access to everything. We have so we'll start with foraging bands. That's the original human existence from 300,000 years ago up to 10,000 years ago, and even today, there's still plenty of foragers out there. Maybe under 50,000, probably maybe under 100,000 globally, but they're still there. Um, Usually in rainforests and in deserts and in the Arctic regions. They follow simple informal rules. The average person in a remote band will almost never encounter a stranger. They have no leaders, no officers. Disputes are either settled or you never see your family again. So if you want to stick together, you got to figure out some way to solve a dispute. If you don't solve it, they'll just leave. There's nothing keeping them there. There's no need for money. This is a gift economy, but it's even looser than the gift economy we saw with the tribal people in the movie. Relationships are more important than goods because tools and foods disappear, but people are around for your whole life. So there's a tremendous emphasis on human relationships and downplaying money and things. Hunting is deeply spiritual. There's lots and lots of leisure time. This is the original affluent society that Marshall Solins talks about. He's an anthropologist who used this phrase for the first time. He made the argument that since hunter gatherers gather food, they did studies back in the 50s. They studied hunter gatherers in southern Africa, and they found out how much time they spent a week gathering food, and they gathered for 15 to 20 hours a week, and then the other 148 hours in the week they just hung out, did nothing. And so we have that joke in the book, and if you haven't read it yet, it's fun. Basically, there's this guy who goes on a cruise. He goes on the Caribbean cruise, and he's a pretty wealthy guy. He's a businessman, and he's got thousands of dollars to spend going around on a boat. And they hit one of the islands, and so he's walking around the island, down the beach, beautiful beach at 10 a.m. Um, and he sees a guy there sleeping against a coconut tree, and he says hi to him, and the guy says, "Hey man, how you doing?" And he's like, "Great, I'm on vacation. What are you doing?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm just hanging out." "You live here?" "Oh yeah, yeah, I live here." "Do you work?" "Yeah, yeah, I have a boat. I went out. I'm a fisherman, so I went out at 5 this morning and I fished for 2 hours, and I got enough and sold it off. I'm done, so I'm good for the rest of the day. I'm just gonna sleep here on the beach." And the man said, "No, you should go out again. You should go out and get more fish." And the guy's like, "Why?" "Well, if you go and get more fish, then you could sell those and then you'd have extra money." "What would I do with the extra money?" "Oh, you could use it and you could buy another boat." "Well, I'm just one person. How can I do two boats?" He's like, "Well, you hire someone, right? You hire them, you pay them wages, but then you use the extra money that you get from the fish that you sell. You pay them their wages and then you use extra money to buy a third boat." "Oh, wow. Sounds like a lot of fun. What would that do?" "Well, then you could have a whole fleet of boats and then, you could be like really, really rich." And he's like, "Then where would that get me?" It's like, "Well, then you could be like me. You could go on vacation." He's like, "Yeah." "Yeah, and then you could just, sort of hang out in the sun and enjoy life." He's like, "I'm there already, Mon." Already made it, right? So what's the point? What's the point of making a lot of money? Well, if you look at it as leisure time, you're making lots of money so you can have more leisure. Hunter gatherers are already there. They've already got their leisure. They don't work very much. They do a lot of fun leisure activities. They have abundant food. They have a wide variety of food, plenty of calories and nutrients. We have ways of telling their diet, um, and that is through analysis of their bones and their teeth. When we look at skeletons from 100,000 years ago, we find that they had pretty good diets. They're not really sick. They don't have a lot of deficiencies. And overall, they have fewer diseases and better overall health. You can tell from their skeletons. Most of the problem diseases that we have in society are caused by too many people living too close to one another. If you separate them out, you're going to have fewer diseases. Also, longer lifespans. Foragers lived around 45 years from 100,000 years ago. Roman subjects from 2,000 years ago uh, lived about 26 years. So we've got about 20 extra years of life there because we're hunter gatherers and we have better diets and we're not being beaten. So you figure you look at the skeleton, you look at the teeth, especially the um, hunter gatherer teeth. The teeth are strong. There's not a lot of vitamin and mineral deficiencies in childhood when the teeth are forming. You look at the bones, so you can look at the bone inserts in the muscle inserts into the bone at an insertion point with the muscle going into attaching to a tendon and then inserting into the bone. So you've got the bone, and then you've got a little raised place, and then you've got the muscle um, like that. There we go. And so the muscle inserts into the bone here at this insertion point, and when the muscle works really hard, when it's pulling really hard that way, it pulls up higher and higher ridges. The muscle pulls higher and higher ridges in the bone. It's breaking a little bit of bone off. And so you have these really big ridges when people are working really hard because they're really just straining their muscles so hard. It's actually leaving a physical reminder in their bone. And you can see these people were worked to death. You see that in the Romans from a couple thousand years ago. An average, the average Roman was a slave or a peasant or a really hard worker who was being beaten a lot or forced to do this hard physical labor in the fields. Even medieval times, or in China 3,000 years ago. It doesn't matter. Anytime you have an agricultural state, you have millions, majority of the population, maybe 90% of the population, working really hard in the fields, and it's no fun. Nobody wants to do that, and so you have to force them to do it. Nobody's doing that to the hunter-gatherers. They work as much as they want or as little as they want. Um, so the result, so that's how their lifestyle was. So the result of contact with states is often welfare dependency, depression, suicide, and addiction. Okay, when we have miners go into the Amazon rainforest and another little village of a little band, a little band that moved around, that their little homes that they carried with them and built. Every time the miners go in there and force them off the land and into the city, pretty much they end up in a bad situation, and they come out worse the wear.